Okay, welcome to the live stream for the book club on Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship by Adelyn Birch. My name is Dana Morningstar, and this is a book club we do. It's the last Thursday of every month, and it's always at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We normally have other people here with me, but everybody, life happens. Shay is out celebrating her birthday. So happy birthday, Shay. And thank you so much for everything that you do here with the book club and joining us. And you are greatly missed, but we totally understand celebrating your birthday. So let's see if there's anything else going on. Oh, my book. My second book is out. Uh, and it is called Out of the Fog. It's by me, Dana Morningstar. You can find it on Amazon, and right now it's free. It's free until tomorrow night, late, depending on which time zone you're in. So go grab a copy now if you're interested in reading it, because it's free. So Diana's here. Lucia, maybe Lucia is here. Karen, welcome. Says hello. Yes, hello, Karen. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to read this book or not, but if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's a quick read, and it's I thought it was very thorough, and it's one of the few books I've read out there about boundaries that I felt like really spoke to us understanding our like the title's perfect. Like, it's truly Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship. It's really about understanding about what our boundaries are and how they can get so turned around, and kind of how to navigate all that and how to get on track. Because after a person goes through a pathological relationship, it's a lot it's so easy to get lost in that and confused and question ourselves, and to continually get tangled up with really problematic people. Trauma is a lot like taking a magnet to a compass, and that compass is just all over the place, and people are very much the same way. After this happens, it's just this tremendous amount of self-doubt and distrust, distrusting other people, and just this lack of, this level of uncertainty, whether is it them or is it us, or what's really going on, and in the fear of, I have issues, and so I don't want my issues to screw up my chances at a relationship. So we're just very uncertain about how we're perceiving other people, and it's a very confusing time. And I thought she did a really great job in this book with laying it all out. And it's very, it's easy to read, which is a plus, because a lot of books on this topic are not. So hey, Kevin's here. See, Jesse asks, it seems that narcissistic people or whatever is everywhere, and it seems because of their behavior, it's making me crazy, like it's my fault I'm being abused. Well, there's definitely a lot of people out there with really problematic behavior, for sure. And that's one of the things when we first start waking up to this, generally it's this one relationship in our life that brings us to the internet, and we start searching for answers. Is it us? Is it them? Like, what is this? A silent treatment? And they're accusing me of doing things that I'm not doing, and all of this craziness. And people are trying to find answers, and then they start finding answers, and they hear words like narcissist or sociopath, and things start making a lot more sense. And then over time they start realizing, oh my goodness, I see a lot of this kind of problematic behavior. I've had maybe a lot of people, like important people in my life, that have had this kind of, maybe not to the same degree, or maybe even the same type, but equally as problematic behavior, but in a different way. And then we can feel really almost paranoid. Like, are we seeing this clearly? Because there seems to be a lot of people out there that have this problematic behavior. And the reality is your eyes are just a lot more open to it now. So, but yeah, there's this real weird transition time where a person's trying to kind of navigate what's going on. And it's not that you're necessarily attracting more of them, or anything like that. It's just you're a lot more aware of it. So it's definitely not your fault that you were abused, and you're definitely not crazy. So partner support is here. Hello, welcome. And for those of you that are just hopping on, just to let you know, we are going to be discussing the book Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship by Adelyn Birch. The link is in the description below. You can find her book on Amazon. It took me about a day and a half to read it. It's a quick read, but I really liked it. I thought it was a good book. It's easy to read. So highly recommend it. And in this video, I'm going to be going over my top 10 takeaways from that book. So you guys feel free to hop in anytime and ask any questions you might have. And I'm just going to go through my top 10 takeaways. Okay. Yeah, Dandelion says, yeah, for me, learning about boundaries has been one of the most essential, eye-opening learnings for me in my life. And I only just learned this. I really liked the book. And Lucia says, yes, I'm currently healing at the moment, and each day is getting easier. I follow your channel. My narcissist has been gone. We have a 9-month-old son, but I've researched mind control and manipulation. And yay, you said my name the right way. Yay. Okay. Good deal. Yeah, I wasn't sure, so I'm glad I got that. Yeah, discovering boundaries is such a big thing, and we've discussed this before in other live streams. And one of the main challenges that people have, and again, it's just awakening to all of this. So from what I've noticed in myself and in many others has been, normally it's this really problematic relationship that brings a person here. And when we start talking about boundaries or self-love or inner child or any of that stuff that has to do with us, a lot of people, myself included, are like, what are you talking about? Like, this has nothing to do with me. I feel like I was in a hit and run accident. This person was a complete nut job, and lied and manipulated and cheated and stole and like did all kinds of awfulness, and I just didn't even see it coming. And while that's very valid, and frankly, you know, it in many ways is like a hit and run accident, because this stuff isn't taught. And it's not that like, had you had better boundaries, that maybe this wouldn't have happened, because there's really manipulative people out there and they can do a really great job at manipulating people. So, but having healthy boundaries and in a real strong connection with our emotions and our intuition is, the biggest chance we have at avoiding all of this. So it's huge. But um, for a long time, many people don't see the connection. They're like, I didn't do anything wrong. I just tried to love them, and they destroyed me. And so this whole book club discussion, and really any of my discussion on boundaries in general, is definitely not to like invalidate a person or to minimize that, because I get it. I was totally there. And had anybody mentioned back then about boundaries or anything, it would have felt a lot like victim blaming, and I would have been incredibly angry by it. So if you're new to this whole concept and my channel and all of that, I would encourage you to please try to just take, I guess, hold on to what helps and let the rest go, and to try to listen to this with an open mind. And it's okay if you totally disagree with me too. Yes, absolutely. Carol says, yes, don't waste your precious time trying to make sense out of the nonsensical. Watch for danger signs so you don't get lured down the rabbit hole. Yes, and partner support says, being aware is like having clear glasses on. And do you see any connection between narcissistic people and mother enmeshment? Enmeshment. It's There's yes and no. I mean, you could make so many different connections to this. Narcissism, like there's so many different causes to it and so many different factors that come into play. But really, at the end of the day, it truly is about us, and it's about getting a good grip on our deal breakers and our boundaries and our standards and our intuition. I mean, you've heard me talk about this before. After my relationship with Jack, everybody and most people were really nice to me about it. They're like, "Oh, honey, like, how could you have known? There's no way you could have known. He came across like a really great guy, and there weren't a lot of signs there." And I was really making myself crazy over that because I'm like, I wanted something to point to. I needed something to be like, I needed to glean as many lessons as I could out of that so I could not have it happen again. And the only takeaway that I could really hold on to was there were some like really small, subtle red flags in the beginning. And my intuition was going off like crazy. My spidey sense was just like, stay away, stay away, stay away. And I glossed over that, telling myself, "Oh, I must have issues with men or with commitment or what have you." And so that was the big takeaway for me, is to never do that again. Like, really truly listen to your inner wisdom. It's very rarely wrong. So, and it's always worth backing things way up when your spidey sense is screaming at you like that. And in this book too, she talks about it. Like, it's really difficult to try to figure all this stuff out while you're in a relationship, because in any relationship, whether it's with a significant other or work environment or friends or family or what have you, because we have that emotional investment in making it work. And so when a person has an emotional investment in something, they're going to continue justifying all kinds of red flags and deal breakers because they want it to be something other than it is. And so it's really difficult for a person to see things clearly. A good example of this, that again, like, I've been there and I see this all the time in the support group, is people want proof that their partner's cheating, for example. And they're like, I just need to know. I just need to know for certain. But the reality is, you're probably not going to like walk in on them in the act. And and even if you did, if you're continuing to buy into all of their excuses for all of the squirrely stuff that they've done so far, all of the text messages, coming home late, really changing up like their grooming habits, going to the gym. Like, if they've radically changed their behavior and they have all these like, or maybe just one, like, quote unquote, like, kind of new friend, but you're not, you know what I mean? Like, if they're acting like they're having an affair, then they're probably having an affair. And but if they've been giving you a bunch of excuses, "Oh, you're jealous, you're paranoid, it's nothing," uh, you know, or blaming you for it, then odds are there's not gonna be any proof that you're gonna get that's gonna actually satisfy you. And again, like, the odds of you walking in on somebody in the middle of the act is very, very rarely happens. So, uh, it's about kind of figuring out, okay, well, where are my boundaries in all of this? Like, putting their behavior aside without playing like we're being a super sleuth here, putting their behavior aside. We don't need to figure out their behavior. We need to figure out our boundaries, our standards, our deal breakers, and what works for us in our life. And you guys have heard me talk about this before, but I think a really, before, my deal breakers were basically addiction, adultery, abuse, and a really like an attitude, like a really rotten attitude, somebody that was continually critical, negative, condescending, that kind of stuff. Those were my deal breakers. And I've since really backed it up even further to where if a relationship is perpetually confusing, if it's controlling, if it's crazy making, that's a big one, crazy making, if it's uncomfortable, if I I'm having, if it's causing mental anguish, then those are my signs now that it's time for me to leave. And it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what's going on with them. It doesn't matter if they're a narcissist or not. It doesn't matter. That's no way to live. And those are all some major warning signs that this is not the situation for you. And again, whether that's a partner or a work environment or a friendship or what have you. So our BH asks, do you think that they are aware of what they are doing? Um, or do they just need help? I think some, well, I think that they're aware of what they're doing, like, in the sense that, like, do they know that they're lying? Do they know that they're manipulating? Do they know that they're cheating? Do they know that they're stealing? Do they know that they're, doing these kinds of things? Yes, they know that. Do they know that they're projecting? Like, do they know that they're accusing you of doing things that they're doing? No. Projection is more of an unconscious thing that everybody does it. It's something that we all do when we take our uncomfortable thoughts and feelings and put them on somebody else because they're uncomfortable for us. And so psychologically speaking, we try to get rid of that discomfort by assigning those thoughts and feelings to somebody else. So people generally are not aware of when they're projecting, but it's still a problem though. So, um, and it generally means they're up to no good. If somebody's accusing you of cheating or wishing they were dead or, um, thinking of leaving them or whatever, if somebody starts saying stuff like that, that's strange. And if they're telling you how you think and feel, odds are that's how they think and feel. So, as far as like their other behavior, like the abusive behavior and stuff, they're aware of what they're doing, but they feel justified and entitled to do it. And whenever a person feels entitled to do something, if they feel that they're in the right, any of us, if we feel that we're in the right, then we don't see anything wrong with our behavior. And that's what's so tricky with these kinds of personality types is they keep justifying stuff to themselves that's not justifiable. And that's truly pathological. I mean, just deep, twisted wiring deep down in them. And getting them help, first of all, for help to actually work, a person has to actually want help. And they have to be actually willing to, therapy can be great, but just going in and sitting in a chair and talking to a therapist for an hour isn't going to do anything if the person's not willing to truly do like the introspection and the self-reflection needed to make the most out of that therapy session. And when you're dealing with somebody who's like really largely emotionally immature and deeply dysfunctional like that, they can't handle reality for any number of reasons. Like they're a million miles away from being accountable for their behavior. And so for them to truly get help, they'd have to want it and they'd have to want to keep going on a regular basis for most likely years, if not decades. And what happens more often than not is because they, again, like they think that they are in the right, and trying to get through to them that they're not right, that it's not okay to yell or hit or cuss or freak out because you don't get your way, or it's not okay to lie or cheat or steal, or kind of the basics of adult behavior. If a person kind of lacks that moral compass, it's really hard to teach that. And most people, especially adults, we don't like being told that we're wrong, and we don't like somebody else trying to teach us differently. It comes across as controlling and condescending. And for them, they don't think that there's any problem. So that's what makes it such a challenge to get through to a person that, they're just so kind of lost in a paper bag of their own behavior. Let's see. Karen asks, so when do you know it's safe to invest in a relationship? I think a lot of it's going slow, and she talks about this in the book. It's going slow and kind of taking the temperature of the relationship and how we feel about things along the way. So, maybe before we kind of once we're awake to this, right? So that maybe like before we took everybody at face value and we were very quick to rush into things and we had the mindset of, I'm going to trust other people unless proven otherwise, and we just gave our trust freely and easily and quickly and took other people at face value and were very quick to fall for other people. And then, we realize something, we were in this awful relationship and then something happens and we're kind of like, whoa, now I'm really freaked out. I don't know who to trust. I'm scared of other people. I'm scared of getting hurt again. And we take a few steps backwards and we start learning about red flags and all these kinds of things and we're piecing it all together. And then we might hear on the internet, okay, well, and I've said it too, like, it's going to take at least 30 days to truly know a person. That's a bare minimum. If you're going to most likely start seeing kind of cracks in their mask, it's going to be within those first 30 days. But, you know, the reality is people grow and change. And so they could be really great for the first 30 days. And then after 3 years, issues come up. So I guess what I'm saying is there's never really a point where we can so I would say for like getting emotionally invested, I would wait at least 3 months of observing them in a wide variety of settings. How do they handle when you set boundaries? How do you feel around them? How much time are you guys spending together? How do they handle losing? If you go play cards, you go bowling, how do they handle that? How are they in traffic? How do they act towards animals and children and the waitress? And how do they handle frustration? Like these kinds of things. So it's important to see a person in a wide variety of situations. Um, but then to also kind of, once you do start to become more invested in a person, if you can develop those healthy boundaries and those deal breakers, realizing that you might really enjoy them, you might love them, they might be absolutely wonderful. But there comes a point down the road, if they develop a meth addiction 5 years into your relationship, I would encourage people to really have kind of that, mm, like sense, like that centering where you're like, you know what, I'm not going to be dragged through hell by somebody else's actions. And if they start becoming abusive, like after you move in together or something happens, to had this idea of, okay, you know what, like this works for me right now, but there will be at no point in time, I will never be okay with being mistreated. And I'm never going to be okay with dealing with abuse, addiction, or adultery. I mean, those are my deal breakers. So whatever your deal breakers are, but to me, it's not negotiable. I don't care if we've been together for 5 days or 50 years. Like it's just because if there's no trust there, then there's no relationship. Okay. Yes, exactly, Maria. Maria says yes. An important point is seeing them in a variety of settings over months. 3 months of Netflix and chill doesn't count. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what a lot of people do. They move really quick and they're like, this person's so amazing. And all they're doing is hanging out at home and, you know, doing the whole Netflix and chill. And that's, you know, you're better off seeing a person in a wide variety of situations. Uh, and seeing like, do your morals and values match up and um, all kinds of things. That's a good one. River Song says a big red flag for me is who do they admire? Yes. And what are their friends like? Because kind of that's the whole birds of a feather flock together thing. If they've got friends that have no moral compass, odds are that it's a pretty good warning sign that they don't either. So, and even if they do, if they're hanging around with other people that have no moral compass, it can very quickly become a slippery slope into them being like that, because any of us tend to become we tend to take on the behavior of other people that we spend the most time with. So it's really important that we pay attention to who we spend time with and that we're very particular about it. It's about valuing yourself and your emotions and your time. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Maria says, "Yes, Dana, I wanted them to be helped more than they ever did. That was a huge mistake on my part, wanting it for them rather than accepting them as they were and walking away cleanly when it didn't work." Yes. I think that's a real struggle for so many of us, especially if we're in like a helping profession where we think I can do this, like I have the skill set, like I can help this person. I help people all day long. And then just realizing, a person's got to be able they've got to be able to want it for themselves and they need to do it on their own. And because it just creates that really unequal dynamic where we're becoming like a parent or a therapist or a teacher or um, some sort of unequal. It's not a relationship of equals at that point. And that generally just doesn't work because nobody, we don't want to date a project, we want to date a person. And so it frustrates us and it annoys them when we're trying to change other people. Yes, Maria says, talking to Karen, yeah, I used to overinvest and really quickly, really learning to not to invest in people right away has made my life so much better. Yes, that's huge. Just to slow it down. And that's one of those things that I think for many people, it takes kind of going around that mountain a few times to really fully learn. You set the pace. You set the pace. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if somebody is coming on strong right off the bat and they want to make you their girlfriend and they want to move in together and what it does not matter. And that might sound really selfish to be like, it really doesn't matter what they want. And that's another like mindset shift that we have to make and realizing that it's normal and healthy. It's healthy. It's not normal. It's healthy for you to set the pace of how fast or slow things go. And it's if somebody else doesn't agree with that, and if you're like, you know what, there's going to be no sex for at least the first 90 days or however long. And this is, I expect, um, I expect for us to go out on a few dates. It doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be time consuming, but I expect somebody to make the effort of like, let's go out on a date, not come over to my house and I'll make dinner for you. Or, hey, can I come over to your house and you can make dinner for me? Or, hey, let's Netflix and chill. To me, that shows it's just disrespectful. So, and if somebody can't kind of meet my boundaries and standards, then they're gone. Like it's not a point worth discussing. And same thing with setting that pace of, well, okay, well, they really want me to text them when I get out of work and when I wake up and when I go to bed. And they really want X, Y, and Z. And it doesn't matter if you're not okay with that. If you're like, you know what, that's really smothering, like that's too much. And you set that boundary of, hey, you know what, like I really enjoy talking to you, but this is a little bit too much for me. And they're either going to be okay with it or they're not. And if they're not, then they leave. But one of the things for us is being okay with somebody leaving if they're not a good fit for our boundaries. And that can take some getting used to. So I think so many of us, it's hard if you find somebody that's really attractive or really funny, or, you have this great chemistry with them. I think any normal person's going to be invested in trying to get that to work out. Because you're like, oh, I really like this person. I really want them to like me too. And I really want to have this relationship. And it can be a little bit intimidating at first to be like, well, I don't want to upset them to where they leave because I really want this to work. But the flip side of that is if we're letting them control the pace, and if we're so afraid that they're going to leave, then we're going to be compromising our boundaries and our standards and our deal breakers. And then that's how we kind of get hooked in and then dragged along for all kinds of really wild rides. Oh, yeah, totally. Maria says, yes, really to think, really, who am I to think I can save anyone? My savior complex needed to die for my own sanity. I have so much more energy now. It's unbelievable. Yes, completely. And it took me decades to get to that point because I have been in a wide variety of like helping, caregiving, teaching professions pretty much my whole life. And so it was always about another person. And I remember having other people like bringing this up to me of, it's okay to say no, or like, oh, you give so much and blah, blah, blah. And like it was a bad thing. And I was like, no, I'm a good person. And I didn't see that that was bad or wrong. And it's not, but it's a problem to an extent. And the extent that I had been taking things, it was definitely a problem. And I had that same pattern of kind of caregiving in my relationships too. So, you know, it's really important to date somebody that's on the same level as you. The Bible, and I'm not Christian, but the Bible talks about this, like the importance of being equally yoked. And there's a lot of truth in that. You really want to find somebody that's got the same morals, the same values, the same mindset, the same life direction. Um, you know, like that if you have a job, they have a job. If you can stand on your own, that they can stand on their own, that they've got the same kind of level of like self-awareness, and you know what I mean? Like you're just kind of on that same page, because trying to get somebody up to where you are very rarely, if ever, works. So I would love to hear some more kind of aha moments you guys had with boundaries. If you did read this book, if you have anything that you want to chime in, please let me know. And uh, anything that you've realized about your boundaries over time, and since you've become more aware of kind of different red flags, or different videos that you've watched out there on YouTube, like what have you come to realize about this? Anne says, yes, my marriage counselor said we were unequally yoked. He was all a lie. It was very eye-opening. Yes, and so many people, and I talk about that specifically in my second book that just came out a few days ago, which is free on Amazon right now. Just a little plug there. It's free on Amazon. It's called Out of the Fog. Dana Morningstar. Highly recommend it. And I really sort out these kinds of different topics about that, kind of sincere remorse versus insincere remorse, commitment versus codependency. A lot of these really commonly confused concepts where if you're a normal, decent person, and a relationship versus a manipulationship, all of these concepts, if you're a normal decent person and you're going through life thinking other people are normal and decent too, especially if they're telling you everything, they're giving you that idea of, yes, that you guys are on the same page. If you're saying, hey, you know what, I'm Christian and I really want to have children and I want to homeschool and I want to live in Iowa, and you've got this whole plan, and they're on board. They're like, yes, I want that same life so much too. And then you find out that they're saying that they're Christian or what have you, but then they're out there and they're lying and they're cheating and they're stealing and they're manipulating and they're doing all kinds of squirrely stuff, and it's really hard to reconcile Well, they say that they're Christian, we're going to church every Sunday, but yet their behavior doesn't map to that. So, what do I believe? And especially if you've got a real manipulative person that promises change and that you guys are going to start going to church and that things are going to be different. And it's really difficult for a person to find their way out of that and to really realize that they could be married to a person that's that much of a pathological liar. I mean, that's just not even on the radar for most people, especially if the person's a kind, decent person. We don't normally walk around thinking about other people being pathological liars because we're not pathological liars. So Shannon says, I see that my mother crossed boundaries left and right, even when I was a kid, and especially when I was a kid. I knew not to do this with my kids uh, by watching my mom and what not to do. Yes. And that's a huge out of instinct. Yeah. And that's a huge thing. So I am a real believer in that we kind of get two types of role models out there. We get, the good role models that do a great job. They're like, oh man, that person was a really just really kind, loving parent or friend or boss or what have you. And we're like, yeah, I would want to be like that, them someday. Like they really did a great job. Then we have what I call reverse role models, which it sounds like your mom had a lot of that. So it's all of this behavior that we see that and we're like, you know what? I never want to be that. I'm going to be the exact opposite of that. So where she might have been, really frugal or really, done a lot of like put downs or made you guys feel kind of less than important and not made you a priority or pushed boundaries right and left. You're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do the exact opposite. And that's so cool that you realize that because, half the time people don't. And then they end up repeating that exact same pattern with their own children. Anne says, that was my ex husband, what you just described. Yes. Well, Anne, you're not alone here. I think you're going to find a lot of people are in very much that same situation. And it's incredibly, it takes a while. It takes a while to fully wrap your mind around that this can be your life. Like, how did I get here? And how did I marry a person like this? And how did I not realize that they were like this? And there's all of these questions and all of this confusion. And then it's very common for a person to wonder, like, could they change? And at what point do I give up hope that they're going to change? And especially when you have that religious or spiritual component to things, where people really struggle with, well, I've got children with them and now they're promising change. They never promised to go to therapy before, but now they are. And so I feel like I need to keep giving them second and 20-second chances if they keep promising that this time's going to be different, if they're going to actually change. But what normally happens is when a person shows you that they're kind of missing a moral compass, when they're lying and pathologically lying and like cheating and stealing and doing these things, is oftentimes when they do go to therapy, uh, they generally don't go for more than three. Most people, I think, in general, tend to not go for more than 3 sessions, but they really don't go for more than 3 sessions. They don't do a lot of the inner work there. They kind of, just blow sunshine at the therapist. And, just in a good, it can be difficult too for a therapist to see to get a good feel for them because they're so manipulative. But if they're just saying, "Oh, I really get it now," and if it feels like a light switch has been flipped and like boom, they get it and they're like, "Man, I didn't get it before, but now I do, and this is so amazing." And they're doing this total 180 and all of a sudden they're the perfect partner. Odds are what's happening is they're just acting the part versus really changing, and then they're getting better at hiding their problematic behavior. And then, so for their significant other, they think, oh my goodness, my partner's finally changed. I have this amazing husband and this amazing father who's now everything that I want him to be. But then there's this feeling of like doom, like waiting for that other shoe to drop of like, can I really trust this? Because they seem to change so quickly overnight. But this person was, on Craigslist or sleeping with hookers or, you know, like had credit cards under that I didn't know about and was doing all kinds of squirrely stuff. And, you want to believe that they can change, but that kind of stuff is so incredibly outrageous that I just, generally what happens is, and they don't stop. They just tend to do more of it. And you know, it's hard. It's hard to come to terms with that. Vegan Yogi asks, what does FOG stand for again? Fear, obligation, and guilt. So, and that term comes from a book called Emotional Blackmail. So my book, the Out of the Fog, is basically out of that fear, obligation, and guilt. So fear, obligation, and guilt are ways that people, that especially emotional manipulators, go about manipulating their targets. And so there's this fear of that they're going to leave. Fear, might have fears of abandonment, fears of being a single parent, fears of not being able to financially support ourselves, fear of, um, what is not being able to find love, fear of what they're going to do if we divorce them. Are they going to freak out and start stalking us, or are we going to be in danger? So there's all different types of fear. And then fear of what other people might think, especially if a person is, in some sort of like religious community. Oftentimes, like Kevin was saying last night, a lot of times people don't understand, and they'll continue to say, like, you need to give your partner, a 20-second chance, and God can do wonderful things. And you just need to triple up on your praying. And um, so then there's this fear of like, well, what is God going to think about this? And what are other people going to think? And am I a bad person? And so lots of fear. And then obligation, what do I owe my kids? And what do I owe my parents? And do I need to keep contact with people that are dangerous and destructive? And, um, doing things because we feel obligated to. And then there's the guilt of, what if just, all the guilt, like feeling bad for setting a boundary, feeling bad for walking away, feeling like that we somehow need to save them, feeling bad for our children. If you have children and you leave, uh, just all kinds of guilt, especially if you know that your partner, like this person is really messed up and like they need help. And it can be quite the challenge to realize like we can't help them. Like they need to help themselves, but it's hard to walk away from a person that you're like, this person seriously needs help, but I can't be the one to save them. So the fear, obligation, and guilt that's what they tend to use to keep us as a puppet. And it's also a lot of what we do we feel obligated. Like it's a kind of a place of unhealthy action that we take, where we're taking action out of fear, obligation, and guilt. That we are afraid of being abandoned, that we're afraid that we'll never find anybody else, that we're afraid that we're going to, grow old alone, that we're afraid that we're not going to be able to financially make it, that, you know, we're afraid that it's our fault. So all of these things that we're taking this action from this place and um, having a hard time setting our own boundaries with these kinds of people in these situations. So let's see, let me get into, yeah, Maria is talking about no contact, not being about them. And it's so true. Like no contact isn't about like punishing other people. It's not about teaching them a lesson. It's not about freezing them out. It's self-care. It's 100% self-care. It's being like, these are my boundaries. These are my standards. These are my deal breakers. Like they're not going to understand. They're probably going to go crying to everybody else about how awful we are and how inflexible we are, especially if that person's family. And especially if you do have that like religious or community involved. then they're going to go around to everybody else. Oh, I just wish she'd give me another chance and I would do anything to make this work. And boy, I really messed it up this time. And they can really talk a good game. And we can feel really guilty if we go no contact. Um, but yeah, it's about self-care and it takes practice. Okay, so let me go over these top 10 takeaways from this book. Again, it's Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship by Adelyn Birch. So, the first point that I really like that she makes is that all abuse starts with the boundary violation. And there are different forms of abuse. However, they all have one thing in common. They all start with the boundary violation. This is not to say that all boundary violations are abusive. They are not. But it's important for us to be aware of our boundaries so we can tell when they've been crossed. This is so huge because abuse it's slow. It's a slow, subtle kind of grinding down of another person. And it oftentimes starts off in kind of these slow and subtle ways where it catches us off guard and we're like, whoa, what? Uh, I had a friend of mine who had a very abusive ex, and we were talking about it was so bad she moved across the country. And she was talking about it, and the first sign was he grabbed her arm really rough. Like they were kind of playing around and they were walking into a movie, and he wasn't joking. Like he really grabbed her arm and grabbed her. And she said that first time of like, whoa, that's really weird. And then it just became more progressive. And then of course, oftentimes there's verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse precedes physical abuse. So, because it's that dehumanizing of another person. And so these subtle boundary violations, even though at the time it might not seem like a big deal, any of us can generally justify that. Well, maybe he didn't know how hard he was grabbing onto her. Maybe he still thought they were horsing around. Maybe, he had a few too many drinks. Maybe he was in a bad mood. Maybe, but it really doesn't matter because there's just no excuse for it. And if a boundary is crossed, then at that point, we need to really look at that and figure out, okay, how am I going to handle this? Am I going to address it with the person? And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but is this a deal breaker, boundary violation, or is this something that I want to try to address with the person and make it clear to not have this happen again? Because let me touch on this too, because I don't remember if she really touches on this in the book so much, but I see this a lot, and I've done this a lot, where people will have their boundaries violated, and then if we're in a relationship and we have this fear of being alone, and if we're motivated to continue to have things work, then we might think that setting a boundary is going to be, yelling at the other person or continually talking, like forever talking about things. Like, well, we mentioned this before that you were gonna do something this weekend, but you stood me up, and I'm really hurt. And if you're continually talking about the same situation and nothing ends, then there needs to be some sort of consequence. Like at some point, there has to be a point where you walk away. But if we're not okay with walking away, then we're stuck in this mode of, well, then I guess I just have to double or triple up on my communication, and I keep bringing it up, and I'll bring it up in multiple different ways, and I'll keep trying to make this work. And what's even more confusing about that is we can trick ourselves into thinking that we have this amazing relationship where we can communicate things to our partner. But the reality is, if you're having that same conversation about their behavior, then you're being manipulated, because normal people, if they're truly sorry, then they change. And Tricia says, yes. Then another first sign is confusion. Yes, absolutely. And so if you're experiencing something, so like that example of my friend being grabbed by her arm, And she was like, what? Like, where did that come from? Like that escalated quickly. That kind of a thing of, wait, what? And when these things are happening, it can be a challenge to kind of not gloss over them, because sometimes they are so small, you know, where I think about in my own situation, there were little things that didn't add up with all of the lies in the very beginning. But again, like anybody can justify stuff, you know? So, it's hard to slow things down and this is why it's so much easier to see things clearly when we're not emotionally invested in a situation. And it can be very hard to not to pace ourselves and not be so emotionally invested right off the bat. And other people might even argue with you about that and be like, you need to love like you've never been hurt, and you need to trust other people, and just get back out there and start dating and all of that kind of stuff. It's really well intended bad advice, because it's not healthy to trust somebody until you know them. And it's not healthy to love like you've just to fall in love so quickly. That's fairy tale, naive kind of stuff, and it's going to get you hurt. And not only that, but it's let me clarify that, because it's not even about not taking action because we're afraid to be hurt. It's about valuing your emotions and valuing your time. Whether or not you get hurt may or may not happen, but if you are always coming from a place where you value yourself and your emotions and your time and your body and all of these things, then a lot of the problematic people just kind of wash themselves out, because you know they're not looking for a challenge. They're more often than not, they're looking for a target. Interesting. Trisha says, I remember years ago going on a first date at a duck pond. My date started throwing rocks at the ducks to hurt them. I never saw him again. Good for you. Yeah, I don't blame you. That's a big red flag. So I'll tell you too, something, how easy it is to kind of read into a situation. I'll give you the opposite example of that. I went on a date with a guy when I lived up in the mountains, and we actually met at a gas station. We were both getting gas, and uh, he had this real fancy sports car. And so he was telling me something about, I don't even know, we got to talking about, he was going slow up the mountain and how his car didn't like to go slow. And but there were all these baby birds, and he had hit like one or two of them, and so he didn't want that to happen anymore. And I read that situation as he didn't want to hit the baby birds because they were baby birds. And the reality was he didn't want to hit them because they were messing up his car. And so it took me a while to realize that, oh my goodness, like I totally put like my moral compass and my values and stuff onto him, and that was never there. Like that was 100% me. So, but again, like he was so handsome, and there were a lot of things about him that like I really liked, and I wanted him to be a certain way, but he wasn't that way. And just it's going slow and seeing people for who they really are. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Creep Central Broadcast says Dana's new book is awesome. I'm glad you like it so much. That makes me feel so relieved. It's always so nerve-wracking when you put a book out there because you never know like what people are gonna like or dislike or how they're gonna interpret things. It's really, really nerve-wracking. So if you're new or if you're just hopping onto this, just kind of FYI, my second book is out. It's on Amazon. Ebook version is free until tomorrow night. So please go grab a copy of it if you're interested. It's called Out of the Fog, and it's by me, Dana Morningstar. So okay, so let me get back to my book club notes on this. Yeah, it's interesting. Vegan or no, Trisha was saying, yeah, you projected how you would feel about baby birds, and that's sad that he felt that way. Totally. And it's weird, I've had this happen with, like, multiple people where especially with, like, animals in the road, that they'll hit an animal or they'll see, like, a dead animal, like, they'll run over, like, an already dead animal, and they're like, "Oh god, I hate when that happens." And so then I'm here sitting here thinking like, "I know, isn't it just awful?" Like, it I get really sad whenever I see a dead animal, and then for them, they're like, "Yeah, it's so gross, it's on my car now." It's just a very different mindset. So, yeah, I think it's important to be careful to, not project that kind of stuff onto other people. Um, okay, point number 2 in here that I really, 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 really liked. Okay, number 2, it doesn't matter why another person is abusive, and it doesn't matter if they are doing it on purpose or not. Abusers are aware of what they are saying and doing, but they may not understand that what they are doing and saying is abusive. This could be for any number of reasons: cognitive issues, limitations, inability to self reflect on their actions, being raised in an abusive home, drug use, or for any other number of reasons. However, this does not mean that we should accept or excuse their behavior, as there is no excuse for abuse. What matters is the presence of the abusive acts themselves and the effects they have on you. You do not have any obligation to be abused, no matter what their problem is and where it comes from. And you do not have any obligation to try to teach them how to not be abusive. And my 2 cents on that is, and in fact, doing so, trying to teach them to not be abusive, is really going to set you up for further abuse and can actually put you in harm's way. So I highly recommend, like, not trying to confront an abusive person about that they've got the problem, because in their mind they just don't see it. And I've used the example before of, like when we get hangry, like really hungry and really angry, and you get incredibly irritable, and it can really feel like other people are doing these things to you. When you're in traffic or when you're at the grocery store and you're there on a Sunday and there's all these people there, and it just feels like everybody around here is just trying to annoy me. Like, why do I have it all figured out and nobody else does, right? And that's not, of course, not the reality, right? Like, nobody's there intentionally trying to annoy me or be slow to somehow do that to me. That's just my low blood sugar talking. And I can catch myself feeling incredibly irritable like this, but and I guess that's the difference, is having that knowledge of, you might feel really angry and like you want to yell at a person to keep walking, like, why are you taking up this whole aisle? But that's not okay to do. And so they so my guess is that an abuser's mindset's very much like that all of the time. So, if you come home from the store and you forget the kitty litter and they yell at you, in their mind they're like, "Yeah, I yelled at you because you forgot the kitty litter." Or, "Yeah, I cheated on you because you were never home." Or, "You didn't dress sexy enough," or, "She threw herself at me." Like, there's always an excuse. And like, in life, we can always find something to blame our behavior on, but that doesn't make it okay. And that's the difference. Like, there's kind of this emotional immaturity there. For them, it's everybody else's fault is why they're acting this way. But a more emotionally mature person realizes that, yes, other people do annoying things. They can be hurt. They can, whatever. They can not be home. They can not, dress sexy. They cannot do all these things. But that doesn't mean that lying and cheating and stealing and, you know, doing all these things is somehow the solution for it. So, yeah, C Fox says the difficult thing is to not feel guilty around family members who say, "How on earth did you get into this situation?" Yeah. And people don't know. I mean, that's really what it is. Like, it's it's the same thing with getting involved with a scammer or a cult or any other really highly problematic situation. Like nobody starts off thinking that they're getting in an abusive relationship or that they're in a cult or that they're getting tangled up with a scammer. People don't realize this until oftentimes things are too late because it is such a slow and steady decline into the madness. And it oftentimes takes things getting really severe for a person to realize, like, I got to get out of here. And especially if you're in a marriage to this person where you're thinking, like, we need to make things work and commitment is forever. And I've just got to triple down on saving this marriage. And, you're trying to make the marriage work for both of you, thinking that eventually they'll come around. But then they just are never coming around. And so for a normal person, it's that confusion of, I don't understand why they're not coming around, because don't they want to be happy? Like, I'm a good partner to them. So like, what's the problem? Or thinking that we can keep being a better partner and somehow earn their loyalty or their love or their honesty or any of these things. But it doesn't work that way, and they don't get it. And that's another boundary thing too, is if family members are telling you things like, how on earth, why didn't you leave? What's wrong with you? And I still see this stuff with people that frankly should know better. Like Dr. Phil is a great example. I can't even watch that show, but I really can't watch it when he's talking to people that have been in abusive situations, because he just really doesn't get it. And and a lot of people don't get it. Like, I think you have to really live it to fully understand it. And so if a person's coming at you and they're like, oh, well, why didn't you leave sooner or whatever, you don't have to sit there and try to defend yourself and explain. You can just say, like, you know what, I really don't want to have this conversation, and just leave it at that, because they're just not going to get it. Yep. Maria says, yes, the whole look at what you made me do. You provoked me. You, this is your fault. Lies, lies, lies. I leave all relationships after hearing this now. Absolutely. If a person shows that they don't have accountability of their behavior, to me, that's a huge deal breaker. Like, that's not workable. And when I am meeting friends or dating people and stuff, that's one of the things I try to kind of look at, is kind of how much awareness do they have as far as like their own behavior goes. And um, and then paying attention too to like how a person talks about their ex. Like, it can be very eye-opening. And then and this is not just because a lot of us have a lot of anger and upset, and probably don't talk great about our ex either. But uh there's kind of, well, and I think if a person's going to start dating again, it really does help to kind of work through as much of that as possible, to where it's that anger and all of that's not going to be coming out in your current relationship. So okay, so yes, back to, it doesn't matter why another person is abusive. It just matters how you feel about their behavior. And another, I think a good example of that is, there was a YouTube channel. It's off the air now, but you can still find clips of some of their videos. It was called Daddy of Five. And it was this husband and his second wife were raising these five children. And I think it was the youngest son. His name was Cody, and he was like 5 or 6 years old. And they were doing all of these like quote unquote pranks. And of course, they were, doing the whole vlog thing. And so they were capturing his reaction. But these pranks, for the vast majority of people out there, they weren't funny. They were terrorizing. I mean, they would dress up like a really scary burglar and then, come after him, or um, just they would egg them on. They would egg the different kids on and say, okay, well, you know, this kid, or tell the kids you're not going to go to Disneyland, or I broke your toy, or things that weren't true, just to get that reaction out of them. Except this little child, Cody, was not, I mean, obviously not handling it well. And he was having, he was smearing feces on the wall. He was having all these outbursts. He was begging them to leave him alone. He was becoming behavioral. He was crying a lot. And so all of their behavior, so even for them, like it was incredibly abusive, but in their mind they didn't see it that way. They're like, this is so funny, like it's a joke. And it's like, even if that's a joke to you, it's not a joke to your child. Like, he's not laughing. And but they couldn't comprehend that, because in their mind it's really funny to terrorize our child. So that it was that complete lack of empathy for what he was going through, and that inability to kind of, put themselves in his shoes and realize what might be and really, it's not, I was going to say what might be funny for an adult might not be funny for a child, but it's not funny for most adults. Like, if you watch the video clips, you're just like, these people really should not be anywhere around children. Like, they obviously don't have the emotional maturity or understanding to parent. So, anyway, so back to this point. So she talks about healing really begins when the target stops trying to second guess why a person is abusing them, and wondering if this person is a narcissist or a sociopath or borderline, or if they're quote unquote just an abusive jerk, and focuses more on their boundaries, standards, deal breakers, and feelings about how they are being treated. If how you are being treated isn't okay with you, then it's not okay. It doesn't matter what the abuser or anyone else thinks about it. So it's a really huge shift, because a lot of us do, especially after a pathological relationship, we tend to doubt our judgment and our perception of things. And we tend to look at other people for validation. We're like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. And, is this person a narcissist, or is this a red flag, or is it me, or is this weird? And a great way to get that power back is to think about, how do you feel about this? And if it's making you uncomfortable, then that's a problem. So, and that's all that matters. So, really getting clear on, like I'd mentioned before, I really feel like a good kind of guiding light for this is thinking about, if a relationship is perpetually confusing, if it's crazy making, if it's causing mental anguish, if it's causing a lot of that confusion, introspection, is it him? Is it me? Do I have issues? Is this normal? Is this not? Are they a narcissist? I don't know. Like, they seem really nice. All of this waffling and back and forth, like, none of that's normal. So, kind of realizing that all of that confusion, the crazy making, the saying one thing and then doing another, and then you feel like you're losing your mind and you're confused, and just nothing is adding up. If things, like, there's a saying, if things don't add up, it's because the truth isn't in the equation. And that's what's so crazy making about it. So it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, because again, like, there's no shortage of well-intended bad advice out there. Oh, I agree completely, Maria. Maria says that, yes, it's cruel to make somebody the joke while that person is clearly upset at being the target. That is not gentle teasing, that's cruelty. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And um, I think it's just, again, this stuff isn't taught. And so because of that, I think so many of us, we kind of excuse that. We're like, well, maybe they just didn't know. Maybe it's because they had their own bad childhood, all of this. And it really doesn't matter. If it's not okay with you, it's not okay. It doesn't mean that you're too sensitive. It means that it's not okay with you. And, you know, just because, And I've used the example before, like my mother growing up, her father used to tease her about having big ears. She doesn't have big ears. I've never once looked at her and thought she's got big ears. Never, not once. And she's so incredibly sensitive about that. And but he would tease her nonstop about that. He thought it was hilarious. Well, it wasn't. And that's the thing. Like just because one person thinks it's funny doesn't mean that it's funny. It can be incredibly hurtful. And the way, one person jokes with one person is probably going to be very different than how they can joke with somebody else. So who were we talking about? I don't know if it was in the support group or where it was. We were talking the other day about people kind of quote unquote joking with each other, like, using words like, "Oh, you're such a slut," or "You're such a bitch," um, or "You're such a pig," like if they're eating a lot, stuff like that. And to certain people, that might be the way that they interact. Like, "Oh my gosh, you're such a slut. I cannot believe you." You know, ha ha ha. If that friend is fine with that level of joking, then that's okay. But if that friend is like, "Dude, don't call me that," or like, "That's not," like, if you're crossing a line, you're crossing a line. It doesn't matter if everybody else doesn't, is fine with joking like that. If they're not, then they're not. So, yeah, Alcuda Babe says, "Yeah, but people don't want to change jokes to fit in with what company they are in." Well, I guess it depends on the people, you know? I mean, like for me, I joke with certain people differently than I joke with others. And I guess it's one of those things like the most restrictive restriction restricts you. So if you've got, let's say, if you've got a group of friends and one person there is, I don't know, like something's not funny to them, let's say, I don't know, a topic, let's say they're an alcoholic and they're just getting into AA and they just got out of rehab or something, like, you know, if other friends are like, "Oh, I don't know, it's just that social awareness." Like, then I would never make jokes about that, like them being in rehab or alcoholism or drinking too much or anything like that. Whereas, if they weren't there and maybe some other friends were joking around about, drinking too much or whatever, it would be different. I guess it's just kind of figuring out who is in your group and what's going on with them. If a person's freshly divorced, uh, now would not be the time to make relationship jokes around them or divorce jokes. Maybe it is, depending on their sense of humor. Just kind of I think it's getting a read for a room. But again, that kind of goes back to that level of like social awareness and like emotional intelligence. So, and sometimes people don't know, like there is some truth to that. And most people, because everybody's got different boundaries, and so nobody knows where our boundaries are until they cross them. And so, and depending on kind of how big of a boundary it is, if you wanted to tell them like, "Hey, this is not okay with me," you'll have to navigate that. Like, is this just something that's not okay with you, or is this something that's an absolute deal breaker for you? So, okay, point number 3 she brings up is crucial to develop boundaries before getting involved in a new relationship. When you get out of an abusive relationship, there comes a time when you start to look beyond the trauma you experienced. You don't want to let what happened hold you back from living your life anymore. However, dating may make you nervous. In the past, you never wondered if the person you were interested in may be an abuser. Now you are wiser now, and now that you And you know that you can't tell who a person is in the beginning of a relationship, and that none of us can. The only way to tell what kind of a person someone is to take things slowly and see how they act in a wide variety of situations. Not being able to tell who is an abuser may be unnerving, and you may wonder what you can do to protect yourself. It's not unusual to feel vulnerable and need to regroup. You may have to withdraw for a while to figure things out. So that is um, so incredibly true. And, we don't know who a person is at the beginning of a relationship. Somebody had mentioned one time, they said it so perfectly. They're like, when you first meet a person, you're not really meeting them, you're meeting like their representative. It's so true. Like, it's like a job interview. You're not really meeting them, you're meeting their highest and best version of themselves. And it takes a while for a person to kind of get comfortable and really start to show who they really are. And for us to kind of realize that. So another thing too is it's along the same lines of like we don't know a person at first. It's really difficult to get a false negative, but it's a lot easier to get a false positive. And so what I mean by that is if a person is problematic, you might be getting warning signs that they're problematic. So believe that. But where it can be trickier is a person can come across and seem like a really great person when in fact they're not. So, I wouldn't give a person, if a person's coming across like they have a lot of red flags and they're a little bit controlling and they're saying weird things and they're staring at the waitress and like they're just kind of weird and creepy and controlling and it's just red flag city. Like you don't need to give them the full 90 days to really see who they are. Like they're showing you right away there's some major red flag stuff going on. And but where it becomes more of a challenge is if a person's on their best behavior and they're coming across as romantic and charming and attentive and all of these things when they might not be. So it's just important to go slow and pay attention to how you feel and how they're treating you. Okay, point number 4. This is a big one too. Understand if and when you have any people pleasing or doormat tendencies. People pleasing is when we allow others' needs and feelings to take priority over our own. This may keep the peace for them for a while, but it comes at a price of our own inner peace. There is less outer conflict, but our inner conflict grows. If we say no, we feel guilty. If we say yes, we feel resentful or we get upset with ourselves. We might obsessively think about the situation and how we could get out of it, and it seems like we can't win. People pleasers believe being assertive is harsh, setting limits is rude, and requesting that our needs be met is demanding and selfish. Some people pleasers don't believe that they have any rights or needs at all, and if they do, they feel guilty and selfish for expressing them. They consider it selfish to act in their own best interest and often live a life of taking action from a place of fear of abandonment, obligation to others at the expense of themselves, and guilt for saying no and not doing what others want them to do. Some people pleasers believe that martyrdom, self denial, and incessant caretaking are virtues to be practiced to the point of misery. This is known as being a doormat. When people are doormats, they allow others to take advantage of them. People pleasers and doormats and others without boundaries don't value their needs, feelings, and desires and continually put others' needs and feelings first. They don't believe that they have rights or they don't know what those rights are. They fear the anger or judgment of others and they fear being thought of as self centered. They fear being abandoned or don't want the hurt of being let down again, or are ashamed of showing their feelings or asking for what they want or need. And this is a big shift when people start really waking up to this because they might have thought, like, I'm just trying to be a good spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend or what have you. I thought I was doing the right things. I didn't realize that I was actually being a doormat. Like, I thought I was just being really go with the flow. I thought I was um, trying to make things work. I thought I was trying to improve our communication. I thought I was being understanding and compassionate. And really, it's being a doormat. And sort of like that saying goes, the only people that respect a doormat are those with dirty shoes. So yes, I agree with you, Maria. Maria says, for people out there, I really believe that you are getting their representative for quite a while, especially if you hold off on sex. I find that the older, smarter, more successful they are, the mask is on for months. Yes. There's generally there's little signs. Some of the earlier warning signs that I remember was using a lot of like casual pet names pretty much right out of the gate. Hey, beautiful. Hey, sweetheart. Hey, hun. Hey, babe. And then signing things like XXX or XO or things like that. It was kind of rushing that level of intimacy. Like, we didn't have that connection. We'd only gone out twice, but I was really flattered. I thought they were so handsome and so charming. And um, I just kind of thought, well, maybe I'm just kind of being prude. And, the reality is, like, it's disrespectful to come on so strong out of the gate. It's really just changing the way we view a lot of this stuff. One of the biggest changes, the shifts for people to make is with love bombing, and to see love bombing as a problem, because society teaches us that love bombing is ideal. This is a fairy tale. This stuff only happens in the movies. It's a once in a lifetime type of relationship. This is amazing. This is, true love. And it can really feel like that when a person's caught up in it, because it's so over the top, but it's not healthy. It's never healthy. Normal, healthy people don't move at that pace. They don't, because they know what they have to offer. They know what they have to bring to the table. They understand, like, man, everything is easy to get into. It's a lot harder to get out of. And they have that emotional maturity of, this person might seem awesome, but they could be a total nightmare because I don't know them. Like, I'm still, like, I'm dating their representative, right? So I don't know them, so I need to go really slow and make sure. Normal healthy people don't say I love you on, like, by the second week. They're not talking about marriage and babies and moving in together and planning really long vacations. Like, there isn't that whirlwind. And if a person is getting caught up in that, if you're getting caught up in that, then it's a great sign that you have a very low or empty bucket that needs some filling. And so I would encourage you to fill it in ways that are healthy and sustainable and nourishing to you, instead of with, narcissists and sociopaths. It's like fast food. It's just garbage for your system. And to really find ways to feel significant and loved, and to get that attention, and um, that the company of another person in a healthier way. I'm a huge fan of the site meetup.com. I think that can be a really great way of getting out there. It's not a dating site, and it's free. And to get out there and just go with the idea of, like, hey, I'm going to go make some friends around things that I enjoy doing, whether that's, playing cards or going kayaking or camping, or, you've joined a book club or whatnot. So, um, that can be a good way to kind of get those needs met. So if you're finding yourself, if there's this pattern of, yeah, I keep getting sucked in with this love bombing, they come on fast and furious. They start calling me like hun and babe and beautiful, and they want to see me all the time, and they're texting me all the time. And they, the first date, they want me to come to their house for them to make you dinner, or they want to come to your house. It's like they're just trying to get you in the sack right away. They're putting in bare minimum effort, but they're talking a good game, you know? And just that's all of that is a problem. And to slow things way down. And it's okay. It's okay to expect to be like, hey, you know what? I think I want to meet for coffee. Like they need to have some skin in the game, and you set the pace. Male or female, you set the pace. And I would encourage you to move slow because, again, everything is easy to get into and it's a lot harder to get out of. All that Kaz says, I've joined meetups, but I'm too shy and self esteem is shot to actually do it. I totally get that. Um, totally get that. I think that you will find that there's, well, here's the thing. You can leave at any time. So if you decide to go on a meetup and you're going to go play, like I used to meet with the group, we used to play trivia every week. And that was so fun. It was at like a pizza place. And, you know, we'd hang out for a couple hours and it was a wide range of people and it was different people, pretty much. Well, there's like the same core, like 4 or 5 people, but then you never knew who else was going to be there. But you could leave at any time. So I would encourage you to find, if you get to that place where you do want to start going out and going to meetups, to go to some meetups where that are like that you can get away versus like a 5 day, camping trip that you're 4 hours away and you're carpooling with somebody. So just kind of some things to consider. Vegan Yogi says, yes, my sister told me she wishes I went with the flow more often whenever I set up a boundary and whenever I went with my gut. Yeah. And that's the thing is there's so much like well-intended bad advice out there. I used to work with this guy who was a therapist at my last job, and we were talking all about like manipulative people and all of this stuff. And he knew a lot of what I'd been through, and he'd made the kind of offhanded comment. He's like, well, you got to trust sometime though. And I just remember thinking like, no, actually I don't. Like that's where I was going wrong, you know? But again, like if you never go through this stuff, it's to me, it's almost irresponsible to give advice about it because you just don't know how tangled up and twisted what this does to a person's thinking and to their reality. And it's just really difficult for a person who hasn't been through it to even try to understand that. And so I know his advice, it was coming from a good place, but you know, that was my problem. Like I'm trusting people right out of the gate. And I really had that mindset of I'm going to trust them until they prove me wrong. And so now, and then and it's a whole learning curve, like going through this and kind of battling other people where they're like, but you need to trust, you should get out there and date. You should, basically like go against your gut. And then we can start second guessing ourselves with this kind of stuff. So it takes practice with, and that's another reason I'm a big fan of Meetup because it's so like you can just leave. So if you go to one of these things, it can be a really great exercise in just people watching. So if you go to a group, and I will tell you too, most of the meetups are people in transition. They're new to town, they're recently divorced, they are going through some sort of major life change. And that's oftentimes why they tend to join meetups. And it's hit or miss because it's the general public, but um, it can be really good to kind of people watch and to kind of practice some of these skills in a very non-threatening way. It's a lot more difficult to learn all about this and then wait to practice this until you start dating again. Because it's hard to see things clearly. It's it's just really hard to navigate all of this, you know, with dating. It's just a lot easier with people that you really don't know and that you're not necessarily emotionally invested in. So that's just something to consider. Okay, so here's where she starts getting into specifics, and I really like what she has to say. So point number 5. Point number 5. Let me get some tea here. Point number 5 is understanding what your basic emotional needs are. Basic emotional needs include the need to be acknowledged, the need to be accepted, the need to be listened to be understood, loved, appreciated, respected, valued, worthy, to feel worthy, to be trusted, feel capable and competent, to feel clear and not confused, to be supportive, and to feel safe both physically and emotionally. A big part in rediscovering yourself is within getting in tune of your emotional needs and your feelings about how you deserve to be treated and your ability to assert your power and control over your life. This is done by developing boundaries. So I think just realizing that this is not something that you have to earn, that this is not something that you're not worthy of. These are basic human needs and rights, frankly. And that you might be used to having other people around you that don't see it that way, that might have that mindset of, well, I'll treat you good once you start acting good, kind of a mindset. I'll only treat you, respect is, I've heard this from several abusive people. Respect is something that's earned, it's not just given. Like, you need to earn my respect. And that's another one of those like kind of slippery slope kind of things there, because there's a difference with treating a person with respect and like actually respecting them. So it's a basic human right to be treated with respect. You may or may not respect them. They might be, a prisoner, or they might have done something horrible where we don't respect them, but they still need to be treated with dignity and respect. That's just basic human rights. So, okay, number 6, understand the signs you are being manipulated and if you are in a healthy relationship. Okay, if you are in a relationship and notice any of the following signs, there is a high probability you are being manipulated. And then she has a whole list here. Okay, your joy at finding love has turned into fear of losing it. Your feelings have gone from happiness and euphoria to anxiety, sadness, and even desperation. Your mood depends entirely on the state of the relationship, and you are experiencing extreme highs and lows. You're unhappy in the relationship and uncertain about it much of the time, yet you dread losing it because you are blissfully happy every now and again. You feel like you're responsible for ruining the best thing that ever happened to you, but you aren't sure how. Your relationship feels very complex, although you don't know why. You are unable to explain the issues in your relationship clearly and wind up saying, it's just complicated. You obsess about the details and try to analyze them in an attempt to figure it out. You talk about it all the time to anyone who will listen. You never feel sure of where you stand with your partner, which leaves you in a state of perpetual confusion, uncertainty, and anxiety. You frequently ask your partner if something is wrong. It feels as though something is wrong, but you aren't sure what it is. You are frequently on the defensive. You feel misunderstood and have the need to explain and defend yourself. You seem to have developed a problem with trust, jealousy, insecurity, anger, or overreaction, which your partner has pointed out to you on many occasions. I will say generally, they've pointed it out to you after you've either asked them something, like disagreed with them, or basically disagreed with them or asked them about another person. I see that a lot. Like, well, who is this other woman that you're texting? Or why were you out late? Or just disagreeing with them in general. Like, that does not tend to go over well. You feel ongoing anger or resentment. You have become a detective. You scour the web for information about your partner, keep a close eye on his or her social media accounts, and feel a need to check their web search history, texts, or emails. When they aren't home, you worry about where they really are. You feel that you don't truly know how to make them happy. You try hard, but nothing seems to work, at least not for long. Expressing negative thoughts and emotions feels restricted or forbidden, so you try to keep those things to yourself. You feel frustrated that you aren't able to talk about things that are bothering you. You don't feel as good about yourself as you did before the relationship. You feel less confident, less secure, intelligent, sane, trusting, attractive, or in any other way you feel less than you were before. You feel inadequate, like you're always falling short of your partner's expectations. You often feel guilty and find yourself apologizing a lot. You continually try to repair damage you believe you've caused. You blame yourself for your partner pulling away. You can't understand why you keep sabotaging the relationship. I hear that one a lot. And I would say probably one of the main reasons that people get into therapy after a pathological relationship is when they start dating again, and especially if they're dating another person that has a pathological personality, and they're like, I don't know what's wrong with me, my last relationship was awful, it was really confusing, and maybe they don't even know what happened in their last relationship, that it really was abusive, but they're like, my ex was really awful, and um but I'm so scared, I'm pushing away a good thing. What's so wrong with me? I'm scared I just can't love again because this new guy or new gal seems so great, and but I'm having all of this anxiety kick up and I just don't trust him and I'm feeling really insecure. And it's just been my experience and I've gone through it too. Oftentimes what that means is that what they're really saying is, I encountered this new person. They're doing a lot of love bombing. I really want to believe that this is sincere and true and that I found this amazing person. But my inner self has my alarms going off big time. I can't quite pinpoint what's off about the situation since they're being so flattering and attentive and charming, but something really feels off. And they're trying to convince themselves that what they're experiencing isn't a problem when deep down it really is. And so I think it can be really difficult because again, like trying to tell this stuff to other people when you're like, they're going to be like, what are you nuts? Like, this is not a red flag. This is, you should be so lucky that this guy is texting you, 5, 10 times a day, and that he's sending you flowers and that he wants to see you all the time. And that he's, you know, giving you all of these compliments. Like, I wish my boyfriend did that, right? But they're not seeing how, like, if there's that they're moving so fast, like the whirlwind thing is kicking up and it's making a person feel uncomfortable, and especially um if some of their texts and stuff or their demands are coming across as controlling, that can be really hard to explain to other people, and it can really even be hard for us to identify. So yeah, Alita says, I'm going through this love bombing right now with someone. I have just this feeling to run. Yeah, Vegan Yogi says, yes, yes, and yes, Dana. Everything you're saying is spot on, and this book is genius. Yes, I think she really does a great job of spelling it out. Um, and this goes back to us setting the pace. And so, Alita, what you were saying about somebody's love bombing you right now is that's okay for that to be a deal breaker. And if you're not wanting it to be a deal breaker, if you're just wanting to really slow things down, then you can slow things down. So a person can try to start up that whirlwind, but we don't have to get sucked into it. So if they're texting you, 20, 30 times a day and they're saying, oh, ciao, Bella, and signing their text like XXX and all of this stuff and wanting you to send pictures and they're sending sexy pictures, like you don't have to get caught up in that at all. Like you can just start staying busy and saying, hey, I'm not okay with sending sexy pictures, and I'm not okay with being talked to like that. Like, you're calling me all these pet names. I hardly know you. Like, let's just slow things down a little bit. And what happens is 9 times out of 10, people, emotional manipulators, and frankly, immature people, they're going to leave because that's what they do. Like, they like creating a whirlwind. They like getting sucked up in it. They've got ulterior motives and they don't know how to have a sincere adult relationship. Sea Fox, let me see. It looks like that's is that a continuation of another thing you said? Because that's a good point. Sea Fox says, Also, do we want to open up when starting a new relationship as it paints a picture of a weak person? And if we don't say anything, then are we already letting the old relationship control this new one? That's a really great question. Okay, here's my 2 cents on that. So, your life, your experiences, especially things that are so sensitive like this, that stuff, in my opinion, is stuff that's earned. And that comes with trust and that comes with time. So, and this is something else that it takes practice kind of for us to relearn, because so many of us we're open books, we'll answer any question, and we let other people take set the pace of things. And so if they're the first date, they're wanting to know all about our divorce or our last relationship, to realize you don't need to answer that stuff. Like, that's really personal stuff. And I know a lot of people get deep fast. Um, and that's just how kind of people are nowadays. But you can kind of nip that in the bud and just say, you know, however you want to handle that. Like, you could just say something like, yeah, my ex was really something, but I'm really glad that relationship's over. And then just switch the topic. I'm a big fan of not telling people, and I made this mistake many, many times, where I would open up to people right away, and then it would be used against me. So, especially with the different abusive people that I was coming across. So I don't do that anymore, because then they'll use that to plant seeds of doubt in your mind. Oh, I can see why you would have a hard time, really letting yourself be loved when you've been hurt so much before. And I'm not like him. I'm totally different. And telling planting these seeds of doubt and telling you everything you want to hear. And so now, I remember one date I went on. This was like 3 years ago, and I had used I don't remember if I'd given him my name or something, but I don't know why I didn't think of this, but he had Googled me and found my YouTube channel. And he was a really nice guy. Like, it was there was no chemistry there, but he was a cool guy. Anyways, we were out at dinner, and he starts asking me about my YouTube channel. And it was like I just felt the blood like leave my face. I was in shock. I just did not expect him to have watched so many of my videos and to know such deeply personal things about me. It was horrible. Worst feeling ever. So, and questions that I didn't want to answer, you know? Um, so I would encourage you to it's okay to value your time, value your emotions, value your privacy, and then open up when you're comfortable opening up. And I wouldn't, I'd wait at least the first month before really talking about previous relationships. There's so much other stuff to talk about, likes and dislikes and hobbies and things to do, and just getting to know each other. And you know what I mean? Like, so much more. Yes, exactly. Maria says yes. Getting to know somebody involves seeing if we have fun the same way, observing compatibility, and not, yes, totally. And not learning each other through our problems. Yes, absolutely. Like, relating to people in ways that are healthy and positive and empowering and functional, versus relating to people through our dysfunction. And that's another great reason for why it's so important for us to bring our highest and best self to any relationship. Because if we are feeling, and this goes back to that whole empty buckets thing. So if we are really feeling, we're walking around feeling unloved or unimportant or lonely or scared or any of that, then odds are we're going to be attracted to kind of the first, you know, kind, warm person out there. And we're not going to be thinking clearly, but it's scary because we might think that we are, and we're not. We're just needing a soft place to land. And that tends to crash us right back into another abusive person. So, really building up a life that you love, hobbies and friends. And like Maria was saying, uh, this way you can relate to people based off of compatibility and instead of all of the drama and the dysfunction. Akuda Babe says, yes, but if you put yourself out there and you do a YouTube video, some people can watch you over and over again and feel like they are getting to know you through your talks. Yes, absolutely. And I think and frankly, um, that's always going to have kind of its own set of pros and cons, I think. So especially for these kind of the videos that I do, right? So like for a guy to watch my videos, uh, it that and this, if I wasn't like I don't tell people, I don't come out of the gate with this right away. I used to. I used to be pretty open about it until that happened, and then I was like, oh my gosh, no, like nobody needs to know that much about me. So like I'm very more, a lot more guarded about what I say about what I do. But but even still, like people, thinking that they know me, and it's I would think really easy for a person, because I do this with other YouTubers too, where I'm like, oh, I really bet they're this way. And it's so easy to kind of work up this idea of what you think this person is. And then in reality, they might be very different. I mean, for me, I think pretty much kind of what you see is what you get, but that's not always the case with people. And so it can kind of create this, um, you know, we might think that they're a certain way and they're not. And then we're shocked. So, oh, excuse me. Phew. Ah, yes, I agree. Maria says yes. I'm sorry to say, but it's emotional immaturity, whether you're a narcissist or a codependent, to bring your problems to the table. I've learned how to be fun, have fun, bring fun. Yes, absolutely. I think what a lot of people, what happens, and this is something that I was doing too, is I didn't, I thought I had worked through a lot of this stuff, but I really hadn't. And I was still obviously like needing to work through it. And so, but when you're dating somebody, like that's not, especially right out of the gate, like that's not the time or the place. And it is like, it's just so much more enjoyable if you can focus on like the healthy stuff and kind of the future instead of the past. Um, Oh, yikes. Aletta says, yes, this guy that's love bombing her. Yes, even though we aren't together, but he thinks we are. And it's like he's trying to force himself to be with me. Yeah, I would just cut that off. Like that's controlling, and especially if you're not into it and he's not letting it go, that's just creepy. Like that's creepy and inappropriate and controlling and not cool. C Fox says it's hard to not carry that bag of victimhood. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. One of the challenges too is uh I really enjoy like really deep conversations with people, and so it can be a challenge to kind of keep things light and focused and forward looking, and because I don't know, I find like what's really going on with a person so interesting. So that's been something I've had to really focus on, kind of slowing down and not getting so deep right away, and realizing that that's, just kind of pulling that back a little bit, I guess. So let me see. Let me scroll down here. Um, let's see. Okay, I got sidetracked in the middle of reading this list. Okay, let me get back to reading my list. Okay, you can't understand why you keep sabotaging the relationship. And I was saying that 9 out of 10 times that you're not. You carefully control your words, actions, and emotions around your partner to keep them from withdrawing their affection again. At times, you erupt like a volcano filled with anger, frustration, and even hostility. You don't normally act this way, and you vow that it will stop, but no matter how hard you try, it keeps happening. Let me just kind of get a little bit more into that. What I see happen with that in particular, and this is why so many people tend to wonder, they're like, oh my goodness, am I the abusive one? Am I the narcissist? Because I'm doing this. And I've never been like this before, but we've had, and I'm just giving examples, like we've had these really just awful drag out fights where we're, hitting each other, or we're screaming, or maybe the cops have even been called, or I'm acting this way that I don't normally act. And what it tends to be is more of a form of reactive abuse where they're giving you half truths or full lies. They're stonewalling, they're withholding, they're denying things, they're being squirrely. All these things are happening. They're not being truthful, and they're causing all of this crazy making. And so if a person's not wanting to leave that relationship, and they're actually trying to get a solution and like figure things out and try to make the relationship work, then it's crazy making to them. And kind of in this attempt to try to get through to their partner, they start escalating, and then they start yelling, and they're like, what is wrong with you? Who is this other woman, and what is going on? And why do you have condoms in your wallet? And who keeps texting you? And then that person keeps escalating, and then they keep stonewalling and denying and deflecting and blaming. And then it just creates this whole cyclone of craziness. So I think it's a good sign to kind of look at, like, if you're noticing personality changes within yourself, you're like, I have never had this dynamic with another person. I've never been angry or felt crazy like this with another person. Then that's a really good sign that you need to get out of there because you're being manipulated. Okay, so you're doing things that you aren't really comfortable with, or that goes against your values, limits, or boundaries in order to make your partner happy or to keep the relationship intact. You feel bad for staying or wonder why anyone else would stay in a relationship that causes fear, anxiety, depression, self doubt, confusion, and frustration. People stay in relationships like this because they aren't always this bad. And oftentimes, in the beginning, things are often ideal. It's when things start to take a turn, the target starts to blame themselves and double up their efforts to make things work. And if things do work, if they are calm, then they feel relief and think that things have finally turned a corner. Their partner may be kind and loving, and of course, blame them for everything, telling them that they will forgive them for being so difficult. These highs and lows create a cycle that the target is not aware of. It feels maybe just like the normal ups and downs of any relationship, maybe even better, actually. The manipulation begins slowly and subtly, and it gradually escalates. Targets are controlled through a series of promised gains and threatened losses, covertly executed through a variety of manipulation tactics. Confusion, uncertainty, relief, calm, followed by chaos are all signs of manipulation. Beware of relationships that substitute intensity for intimacy. A relationship doesn't have extreme highs and lows. There isn't false flattery, love bombing, future faking, or otherwise an ideal or even calm period followed by abuse of any kind. Your needs and feelings are every bit as important as someone else's. If you don't believe this, then odds are your boundaries will continue to be pushed and violated. That's huge, huge. Your boundaries keep you intact. They guard your dreams, goals, values, time, sense of money, sense of self, self worth, emotional well being, physical health, safety, and self respect. Boundaries keep you intact and allow you to live the life that you want to live. And they are held in place by your decisions and actions. If you have weak or non existent boundaries, the space is probably filled with things like low self worth, self doubt, insecurity, fear of rejection, the need for approval, disappointment, and resentment. These ingredients are a recipe for an unfulfilled life and damaging relationships with users, abusers, and manipulators. We get off track when we don't realize our self worth. We don't know who to give our trust to. We believe others have our best interest at heart, especially if they are family, friends, or people that are friendly. We believe that other people's needs and desires are more important than our own. We believe that pleasing someone else is worth sacrificing ourselves for and feel the need to give up our happiness, desires, values, self respect, dreams, money, and thus our lives. uh, let's see, when we don't have boundaries, we neglect who we are and what we want. As a result, we see the skewed image of ourselves reflected in the eyes of those to whom we give our power, and we mistake it for the truth. I'm going to read that again because it's really powerful. When we don't have boundaries, we neglect who we are and what we want. As a result, we see the skewed image of ourselves reflected in the eyes of those to whom we give our power, and we mistake it for the truth. That's huge. That's so huge. And this is one of the biggest things I think a person has to untangle if they've gone through a real emotionally abusive relationship where they've been verbally ground down and told that they were ugly or fat or stupid or not worthy or an awful parent or significant other, anything stupid, anything like that. If they've been told any of those things, and if they have have neglected who they are and what they want, and if they're looking at that other person, and of course all of this, like, we're not even aware that this is going on, but this is what's actually happening because we don't have a solid sense of who we are. We've been led so astray, and so now we're looking at that other person for that validation. And if what's being reflected back at us is all of this garbage, then it's so hard. It's a challenge to kind of unprogram all of the hurt that they've, all of the crap that they've smeared all over us, and it's their garbage. Oh, totally. Yeah, Maria is talking about jealous people putting GPS trackers on their partner's phone. Yes. Yeah, that's I would get out of there with that kind of stuff. Dawn asks, I went out today to go Christmas shopping and I saw a young couple having a fight. I'm still very traumatized and shooken up. How do I get over this? The event brought out my PTSD. Well, I think in part it's such a big question. I think in part it's realizing when we have that response, when we find ourselves having a lot of anxiety or it spirals us into like, we're just really upset by that. We're having a very normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. Abuse is never normal, even if it's all we've ever known. Like, it's not, actually, let me rephrase that. Abuse may be normal for us, but it's not healthy. And so when a person is in an unhealthy situation, whether it's normal or not, if they're in an unhealthy situation, they're going to feel unhealthy. They're going to feel toxic. They're going to feel sick to their stomach. They're going to be upset. They're going to cry. They're going to have anxiety. They're just not going to feel good. So the good news is you're having a very normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. And those emotions, even though they're incredibly unpleasant, they're there for your benefit. They're there as a reminder of that's something that you never want to be a part of again. And so I think if you can look at it that way, if your brain is it's trying to piece together everything that happened to you so it can keep you safe, because that's the main job of our brain. It's always working in your towards your highest and greatest good, even though it might not feel like it, but it really is. And I think if you can maybe try to lean into the pain and just tell yourself, you know what, thank you, brain. Thank you for reminding me that this is incredibly unpleasant and this is not something that I ever want in my life. And I don't even want to be around this. Um, Thank you for trying to keep me safe. I think if you can acknowledge the message that all of those emotions are trying to give to you, because that's really what it is. Like our emotions have messages for us. They're not just feelings that we feel, like they have a message for you. And so if you can get that message out of there, then oftentimes those emotions will settle down. It's when we're trying to run from those emotions and suppress them that they get louder and louder and more intense and more frequent, because it's our brain trying to run us down, being like, hey, I got a message for you. I got to deliver this. I got to talk to you. And but if we can just realize it's trying to get our attention because it's trying to keep us safe, then it changes the way we feel oftentimes about those uncomfortable emotions, and realize that they're not bad, and that they're not something that we necessarily track. There's not something wrong with us, right? Like that there's just it's uncomfortable, but it's meant to be uncomfortable because it has this message for us. I hope that makes sense. Oh, good. Okay, Dawn says yes. Thank you for that. I feel validated and listened to. Take care. Your response made me feel good. Okay, good deal. I'm glad. Uh, okay, I'm gonna keep going here. So back to the identity thing. I think this is such a huge thing. So when a person doesn't know who they are, much like how a child develops their sense of identity, they will rely on developing their identity by seeing themselves reflected back from others. This is a huge problem if the person you are looking at has a destructive personality and consciously or subconsciously needs to tear you down so they feel better. The added challenge for many people that have grown up in an abusive home or with an abusive parent is their original sense of identity was coming from this distorted lens of this really deeply dysfunctional parent. And so if they grew up feeling, less than, or something was really wrong with them, or you know all of their abusive parent was projecting all their garbage onto them, then they might feel like maybe that this is as good as it's going to get, and that these abusive people out there, that they are the problem. And in fact, that's not the case. They just have been around abusive people their whole life. Okay, so point number 7: setting boundaries takes practice and is often really uncomfortable at first. Many people are uncomfortable with boundaries because they may fear abandonment or rejection. We may not like confrontation. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We fear boundaries will keep us from being loved. If we are afraid to have boundaries, it means we care more about what others think of us than what we think about ourselves. In doing so, we lose respect for ourselves and our self worth suffers. Others lose respect for us too. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it's self care. A character disturbed person may try to make you feel like you are being selfish for not putting them first. It's important for us to know the difference between mistreating somebody else and taking care of ourselves. I'm going to read that last part again because that's a big one. It's important for us to know the difference between mistreating someone else and taking care of ourselves. So, setting a boundary with somebody, saying no, saying, hey, I can't do that. I'm busy, or that's not going to work for me, or no, or we just simply go no contact. Whatever it is, we set a boundary, realizing that is not being selfish and that's not mistreating them. That's us setting a boundary and treating ourselves with self-respect and self-care. And I really like that she brings this up too. She says this book is not about trying to fix an abusive or trying to fix a relationship with a toxic or abusive person. This is meant to help you establish new and healthy relationships and to avoid becoming involved with another abuser. And if you are involved with a dangerous person who harms you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, sexually, socially, or financially, the only boundaries that will keep you safe are physical ones, meaning like really no contact, I would say, just distancing yourself as much as you possibly can from a person like that. If you try to start setting verbal boundaries with a dangerous person, they will see it as a challenge they need to defeat. Anyone who purposefully harms you in any way will not respect you or your boundaries. Um, so it's really important. And again, I see a lot of people that are like, okay, I'm learning all this stuff about narcissism and boundaries and all of this stuff. And so then they are in this relationship with a person who's, chronically lying and cheating and stealing and abusing and yelling and hitting and name calling and putting them down. And there's all kinds of craziness in there. And they think, well, I'm just going to try to make this work. If I can just get through to them, then they'll see the light and they'll change. And so I'll start setting boundaries with them. But like I was saying earlier, what tends to happen is them setting boundaries tends to be like, I'm just going to keep bringing up stuff over and over and over and over and over again until they finally get it and change. But that tends to not change anything because the issue in that relationship isn't communication. It's they have an individual issue. They have a lot of unresolved stuff that they need to work through. They're not emotionally capable of being an adult, healthy, sincere relationship. So no amount of communication on our part or self-help books or marriage retreats or praying or any of that is going to change them. Like they have to want to change them. So, okay. All right, number 8, understanding that you have rights as a person. You do not need to earn these rights or deserve them. You have them because you are a person and you exist. Your basic human rights include you have the rights to your own needs and feelings, and and to have them be as important as anyone else's. You have the right to experience your feelings and to express them. You have the right to not be held responsible for other people's feelings. You have the right to express your opinions, to decide what your priorities are, to be independent if you want to be, to decide how to spend your time, how to live your life. You have the right to change your mind, to make mistakes, to change yourself, your behaviors, your values, your life situation, and your life. You have the right to choose who you spend your time with, who you share your body with. You have the right to be treated with dignity and respect by everyone you come in contact with, to be listened to respectfully. You have the right to say no, to set limits and boundaries, and how you're going to be treated by others. You have the right to have your boundaries respected. Okay, number 9, understanding signs of weak boundaries. And I like that she brings this up. She says, weak boundaries are like weak muscles. They only get stronger with use and repetition. Developing strong boundaries takes daily practice. At first, this can feel overwhelming and exhausting, and you don't need to firm up every boundary every day. You will get better with time. Not to mention that what comes across your radar as a boundary violation will also grow with time. In a year from now, you will most likely shake your head in disbelief that you did not realize your boundaries were being violated in so many different ways. The irony is that we often have weak boundaries because we believe our behavior will gain the love and respect of others, but it doesn't. When we have weak boundaries, every act of self denial and compliance eats away at your self respect and the respect that others have for you. Some signs of weak boundaries are ongoing anger at yourself or someone else, feeling resentful, low self worth and self esteem, apologizing frequently, doing things that makes you uncomfortable, doing things you don't really want to do, going along with somebody else's relationship agenda, going against your personal values, rights, or needs to please someone else, putting others' needs ahead of your own, being sexual when you don't really want to, or engaging in sexual acts that make you uncomfortable, letting someone touch you when it makes you uncomfortable, not being able to notice when somebody else's behavior is inappropriate, telling someone intimate details about your life when you've just met them, staying in a relationship that makes you unhappy, returning to a relationship when you know you shouldn't, letting others direct your life, giving as much as you can without getting as much or anything in return, allowing someone to take as much as they can from you, being overwhelmed and preoccupied with someone, accepting food, drinks, or gifts that you don't really want, committing yourself to something that you don't have the time or desire to do, letting others describe your reality, letting others tell you what your thoughts, emotions, and motivations are, letting others define you, not being able to assertively ask for what you want, feeling responsible for other people's feelings and problems, complaining to others instead of talking to the person who is causing a problem, becoming easily overwhelmed emotionally. Actually, let me back up to the complaining to others instead of talking to the person who is causing the problem. This is a great sign if you're finding yourself gossiping or trying to get clarity from other people. Like if you're angry, you're like, man, this happened and I can't believe this person did this. And da, 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 da. That's a great warning sign that you've had a boundary that's been crossed and you might not even realize it at first. Like you're going to most likely feel those feelings at first, that anger and that resentment. And so realizing, okay, if you're starting to talk to other people about it, it's generally because you're not comfortable talking to the person who crossed that boundary with you. Because once you address the situation directly, that, hey, this is not okay with me, then that need to talk it out with other people tends to go away because the situation goes away. It's done. So I think that's something to consider. But again, the caveat to that would be if you're in a relationship with an abusive person, there is no getting clarity or closure with an abusive person, and there is no talking anything out. So that's kind of the difference. Okay, becoming easily overwhelmed emotionally, seeking the approval of others. Inability, this is a big one, inability to separate your self-worth from what you believe others think of you. Self-consciousness and social anxiety, saying yes when you want to say no, feeling guilty when you do say no, saying no when you want to say yes, not speaking up when you have something to say, adopting somebody else's beliefs or ideas so they will accept you, not calling out someone who mistreats you, becoming overly involved in somebody else's problems, not communicating your emotional needs in your closest relationships, avoiding difficult conversations because you're afraid of confrontation or of displeasing someone, doing things out of a sense of obligation instead of protecting your energy and time for things that you're enthusiastic about, spending time with people who drain you or that you really don't like to be around, feeling you do a lot for other people but they don't appreciate it, ignoring problems or staying quiet to keep the peace, expecting others to know what you need without telling them, an inability to be honest. So oftentimes people, when they're uh, learning to set boundaries, they're not comfortable with the truth because they don't feel like they're not comfortable with saying no. And so they might say things like, oftentimes it's a series of little white lies. Like if somebody asks them, hey, can you babysit my kids this weekend? And you really don't want to do it, you might lie and say, oh, you know what? I can't. I'm going to be out of town this weekend, but really you're not. So it's, and it takes practice getting comfortable saying no. And frankly, at the beginning of learning to set boundaries, that tends to be a first step. So like normally people might just agree with things. Oh, sure, I can watch your kids this weekend. And really they're thinking, oh, great. Like, no, I really don't want to watch your kids all weekend long. Like, I was really looking forward to reading a book and doing nothing. Right. Um, if that's the first step where you're actually just saying, you know, you're making up something like I can't, I've got something else going on, then that's okay. That's a very normal step for people. And then they tend to, because most of us have a moral compass. So we kind of tend to move out of that lying stage pretty quickly. So it's okay to, and sometimes I think it helps to think about our response ahead of time. So, and you don't need to defend yourself either. So you can always say, um, I can't, I have plans this weekend. But even if your plans are reading a book, that still counts. So it's finding ways to say no that you're comfortable with. Because most people, especially at first, are not comfortable with just saying no. That, you know, I still am not. I normally say something like, no, I've got plans this weekend, or, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the last boundary that I really remember setting that people got upset with me about was when I was working at my old job, and we had an email go around where they wanted us to work during our lunch for some issue that was not like, you know, it was a work issue that other people needed to figure out, but it was falling on us. And other people were like, yeah, I can come in, like, let's all meet in the conference room and we'll figure it out. And I said, no, like, I'm not going to work during my lunch. Like, I'm going to take my lunch. And there was seriously like just silence. Like that went over like a lead balloon. And I felt kind of like a witch for saying that, because people were shocked. Like, I can't believe that you're not basically that you're not working as a team. It was like, you know what? No, like, lunchtime is my time. We're not getting paid to work. That's work stuff. It can wait. It's not even our issue. And, you know, like, no, be more than happy to work on it after lunch, but I'm not going to work on it during my lunch. So little things like that. It just takes practice. Um, Awesome Juice says, hey, Dana, my partner keeps pulling me back to the relationship when I've told him that I want to leave. Please help me. He harasses me and hurts me. It can be very difficult to get out of a situation like that, where if you're going back because you're afraid to actually leave. And I don't know where you are, if you're in the United States, or kind of what help that you might have. But I think a big part is seeing the situation clearly and realizing, um, that to get the help that you need to get in order to get out and to stay safe while you do leave, whether that means, going to a shelter, whether that means possibly getting some protection and just being very aware of your surroundings. Um, One thing that can help if you do leave a person like that, where you're scared for your safety, because they're not reasonable people. So, and this might sound kind of messed up, but this tends to go over better, is if you blame it, even though it's not your fault, okay, at all, but to make it seem like you need to break up with the relationship because you can't handle things. Don't blame it on him. Don't say, I'm leaving because you're mean to me and you're hurtful and you do this and you do that, because they feel entitled and justified to abuse other people. So saying that is going to make him more abusive. So if you make it about you, I can't do this. I'm just not ready for a relationship. It's all me. Okay. You put it on you. That way he can't argue with you as much. And, um, and also it doesn't kind of it also plants the seed that you're not leaving him for somebody else. Like, you just need to be alone, that you've got a lot of soul searching to do. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you just kind of make it about you. Um, and hopefully in time, he'll move on and he'll leave you alone. If he doesn't, if this continues and he's stalking you and harassing and hurting you, then there really might come a time where you might need to consider moving. So because these people tend they're you're not dealing with a sane person here. So okay. Um okay, point number 10 is understanding that you matter. You have value and you can live a life that you love, and boundaries play an important part in that. Self worth comes from honoring who you are and what you want and living an authentic life. And in order to do that, you need to have your own best interest at heart. Doing so is not selfish, it's part of self care. When we feel love or strong emotions, uh, normally dopamine and oxytocin are involved. Love doesn't have to be blind, and we don't have to throw caution to the wind. This is not healthy, and this is not what a person with healthy boundaries does. When you have boundaries that are based on knowing what you want and need from a partner and a relationship, you will know when things are going off course. You will know what you won't tolerate, such as deceit or failures to keep promises. You will have expectations of your partner, such as honesty, respect, loyalty, and emotional and physical safety. Boundaries protect the things that you value. Not knowing what you want in a relationship makes you a jellyfish, a gelatinous blob that takes the shape of whatever container you're put in. If you aren't clear on what you want in a relationship, you will conform to the other person's agenda since you don't have one of your own. We often think that putting others first is a virtue, but in truth, it backfires. There are plenty of people out there willing to let you sacrifice yourself on the altar of virtue for their benefit and to the detriment of yours. If we are a people pleaser, we only look at ourselves when things aren't going well. We wonder what we did wrong and wonder why we aren't enough to keep them happy. We don't think about our own unhappiness, only theirs. That's really something to think about because your unhappiness matters. If this relationship isn't working for you, if you're feeling ground down, scared, depressed, anxious, insecure, jealous, all of these things, afraid that they're going to leave because they keep threatening things, um, your unhappiness matters. And this is not a relationship. If we are highly empathetic, we're at greater risk of becoming involved with the manipulator. When we're more concerned about other people's feelings than our own, we are the perfect prey for manipulators. This is because we bring enough emotion, love, and investment to the relationship to make up for their lack of it. We fill in the blanks that they create. We do psychological cartwheels while they are content to be carried. When you don't have boundaries, it means that you will put up with just about anything to be loved. But real love and a healthy relationship will never require that you have no boundaries. Giving up a boundary is a big red flag. And okay, so, and she says here too, no one tends to get involved in an abusive relationship. And she spells it out. When we're looking for love, no one thinks, I really want to be in an unhappy relationship with the person who is out to dominate, humiliate, and use me. Ideally, he'll be somebody who has no respect for me and who will manipulate me into losing all respect for myself. He must be able to take control of me so he can hurt me deeply and repeatedly and yet keep me running back for more with just a few kind words and worn out promises. I want him to be a liar and I want to be let down in every way. I want to give up all the dreams I've ever had for myself in exchange for a few stale crumbs of false affection. I want to be kept in constant turmoil as I wonder where I stand with him and what I'm doing wrong, how I can make him happy, where he really is right now, and what will happen tomorrow. I want somebody who will waste my time while he abuses me and diminishes me until I don't have any strength to stand up and walk away. I want to learn to blame myself for all of this, and I want somebody who can make me believe this is love. Even though no one wants this, many people get sucked into it. And so vital for you to know what you want before your next relationship begins and to be able to identify when things start going off course. So she also has a list here of boundaries to think about. And I, again, really, really like this section. So okay, this section, some examples of boundaries to think about. I will not make excuses for anyone's harmful behavior. I will not let anyone make excuses for their own behavior either. I will take things slow and control the pace of a new relationship. I will not see someone more than blank times per week during the first blank weeks or months. This will give me the time to evaluate a new person's character and the space to evaluate my thoughts and feelings about what has happened during the time I spent with them. When I meet someone new, I will maintain my other relationships and interests. I will not become sexually involved with a new interest for a minimum of blank months so I can avoid creating false feelings of intimacy. I will not go against my personal values, rights, or needs to please someone else. I will not be involved with a person whose words and actions don't match up. I will believe actions over words every time. I will not be involved in a relationship with a deceitful person. I will not tolerate deceit in any form. I will not lend money to anyone whom I haven't known and trusted for many years. Under no circumstances will I be involved with someone who is married or in a relationship or who is otherwise physically or emotionally unavailable. And frankly, I would add to that because I see this is an ongoing thing, especially on dating sites. People will say, I'm married, but she knows I'm staying for some reason. I'm staying for the kids. I'm staying because she has cancer. I'm staying because um, we're just, we don't have the money to divorce, or she's okay with me dating other people. That's a very common stuff. You even see it in like dating profiles. So it can make it seem they're planting the seeds of this. And I would strongly encourage you. And so that, okay, so even if it's that, if a person's even, I would not even get involved with a person who's separated. And I wouldn't even get involved with a person who's been divorced unless it's been a solid year that they've been divorced. So, because, you know, a person that's fresh out of a divorce is also incredibly vulnerable. They're probably looking for a safe place to land. They may not even realize it. The odds of you being a rebound are really, really high. They need to work through all of their relationship stuff and not bring it into this current relationship. And if a person's separated, they're still married. So in their mind, they're like, you know what, we're totally over. I'm 100% sure. But, it, it's not over till it's over. And even still, they really need like a solid year after it's over for it to be fully over. So I would just encourage something to think about. Um, okay, I will not participate in humiliating, dangerous, or illegal sexual acts because I am pressured by my partner, nor will I continue a relationship with someone who pressures me to do so. And I added in parentheses, nor will I be with somebody who pressures me about something, period. I will not give my trust to somebody who hasn't earned it. I will only trust someone who proves themselves trustworthy and only for as long as they continue to be worthy of trust. So if a person, you've known them since junior high and you trust them and they're really great friends, but now they're an alcoholic or an addict, just because you trusted them before does not mean that they're trustworthy now, especially if, especially in those kind of situations when you're dealing with an alcoholic or an addict. It's the addiction that's taken over. So it's important. to kind of reevaluate with trusting a person. Um, I will not be a part of a relationship where I am not treated with love, care, and respect. I will not be a part of a relationship where my emotional needs are invalidated. I will not be involved with anyone who mistreats people or animals. I will not marry or move in with somebody before we've been a couple for at least blank years, no matter how in love we might think we are. That's a big one. I would really encourage that too, especially if you have minor children that are living at home. There's lots of predators out there, and single parents are a prime target, and they create this whole whirlwind and can and not even necessarily predators, but just the wrong people in general. And then what happens is, if you're moving in with somebody and you're getting married and all of this is happening and it's like 6 months and it turns out you really don't know this person, and now your kids are along for this, awful ride again. And it's a lot to put kids through. So I would say, on average, if you don't have kids, I would wait at least a solid year seeing a person in a wide variety of situations before you marry them. And then asking yourself too, like, would I go into business with this person? Like, can I rely on them to that level, that could I go into business with them? If the answer is no, then don't marry them, because marriage in many ways is a lot like a business. You're going to be combining responsibilities and finances and your life. And there needs to be that level of trust and adult responsibility and maturity there. And I would really, frankly, I'd probably triple that level of time if you have minor children involved, because it's just, like I said, everything is easier to get into and it's a lot harder to get out of. Uh, Okay, I will not give up the following personal goals of blank for anyone, whether that's going to school, saving money for a house, writing a book, going to the gym, etc. I will not tolerate abusive behavior of any kind, whether that's belittling, humiliating, the silent treatment, yelling, hitting, name calling, subtle put downs, etc. I will not be involved with anyone who becomes controlling, jealous, or possessive. And I would also say who continually tries to push your boundaries. Like, that's a big deal. Like that gal in here earlier was saying, this guy keeps trying to get with her and she's, not really that interested, and he keeps trying to push things. For me right there, that's a deal breaker, because if he's showing that it's all about him and what he wants, then he's not interested in having a relationship. He's interested in getting whatever it is he wants. And for us to make that mindset shift of thinking that that's somehow romantic, or that his persistence is somehow equates to his level of sincerity, when it's not, that's controlling, red flag, problematic behavior. It's not romantic. It's not anything positive. Like, it's just, that's a person that has no respect for you, that wants either to have sex with you, or they think that you'd make a great partner because they can dominate you, because they're continuing to push boundaries and you're still keeping contact open with them. Whereas a person that was more comfortable saying no would have told that person to buzz off a long time ago. Um, okay. So the last one is, when I meet a new love interest, for the first several dates, I will take my own car and meet in a public place for a short time. I will let someone know where I am, where I'm going, who I'm with, and when I expect to return. And I can't stress that enough. Really, um, the most important things, I think, to avoid getting caught up with all of the wrong people is to go slow, to see the love bombing for what it is, and to hold your boundaries. So, meeting in a public place, meeting for coffee, setting the pace of the relationship, not allowing them to stretch it out for weeks or months on end before you meet. Because a lot of people are married, or they're in a relationship, or it's not even them, and they're just wanting to suck up your time. They enjoy being flirted with, they enjoy getting sexy pictures, they enjoy feeling important. They have no intention of meeting, or if they do, they have no intention of a real relationship. And it's so easy to get sucked in thinking this is really going to go somewhere. I have this amazing connection with the person, and really all they're doing is going around and collecting sexy pictures from a bunch of women. So if a person who's truly interested in you, they're going to actually show interest in you. They're going to be okay with like, here's the thing too, is setting the pace, because people that haven't been dating for a while probably don't realize this. Uh, and guys might not realize this either. So if a guy asks you out, and I would strongly encourage you to have your first date be at like a coffee shop, coffee for like, and I would make it clear, I've got plans later on this evening. Even if the plan is reading a good book, you're not going to be at coffee for 3.5 hours. Like, let's meet for coffee for like 45 minutes. It's basically just to see, is there a connection with this other person? Is this a person I would want to now go to dinner with, versus jumping right into dinner and a movie, and then you're stuck for like 3-4 hours with the person that might not be who they claim to be. There might not be any connection there. You might have even talked on the phone and stuff, but there's just no chemistry in person, and then it's super awkward. So I would just 45 minutes for coffee, see if there's enough for a second date, and then go from there. But if anybody's asking you over to their house, or they want to come over to your house, that's disrespectful. That's them looking for sex. They're looking for bare minimum energy and effort that they're trying to put into that relationship. And at that point, I would make it very clear of like, no, I'm not interested. You know, like, I'm actually looking for a relationship. And even if they try to fight you on that, just nope. Like, you have value. It's worth going out to a restaurant or going on a second date. Um, and same with men, because I think a lot of guys feel like, oh, okay, I really need to invite her out for dinner, but that can that can backfire, and so then it's just awkward. So even for guys, I would encourage you, hey, let's just meet for coffee or for a drink, and see if there's that connection. Okay. So boundaries are useless if you don't defend them. So like we talked about earlier, a lot of people will feel the need to continue to argue about that. So this person really crosses a boundary, they're texting a bunch of other people. They have a bunch of quote unquote friends. They're just acting squirrely. They're not giving you the full truth. They're lying, these kinds of things. And they think, okay, with my boundaries, I'm just going to keep bringing it up to them. I'm going to keep talking to them about it. And all like a solid boundary has a consequence to it. And so it's really important for you to figure out, okay, I'm going to bring this up with this person once. And then if it's not resolved, then what am I going to do? Like, then what's the next step? And she makes the difference. We'll get into that here in a little bit, between like orange flag boundaries and red flag boundaries. But she says, defending your boundaries takes practice, and it does get easier. Abusive relationships and friendships are far more painful in the long term than being assertive is in the short term. And same thing, frankly, with walking away. Like, it might be really hard to walk away from somebody that you're really attracted to or that you feel this chemistry with. But if it's a bunch of red flags and squirrely behavior, it's better to rip that band-aid off now than to wait and then 5 years later be proven right. If a person doesn't respect your boundaries, they don't respect you. And let's see here. Okay, get clear on your deal breakers. Think about your boundaries in terms of code orange and code red. Code red are full out abort mission, whereas code orange may be to stop, think, and proceed with caution. If somebody repeatedly crosses a code orange, then it becomes a code red. For example, if a person is repeatedly late, makes you wait and expects you to change your schedule for them, then you are dealing with the person who expects you to accommodate them and their needs and who does not respect yours. And actually, just real quick, because I noticed we do have a couple guys on here tonight, I just really want to make it clear that this boundary stuff goes both ways. So even though we've been talking about a lot of this stuff in terms of women, guys, you too, this stuff matters for you. So, um, if a person is disrespecting your boundaries and all of this stuff, it's take everything that I've said and make it apply for you. Okay. Okay. So chronic lateness. If a boundary problem is an ongoing issue, it's a warning sign about a person's character, and character disorders can't be changed. Set consequences. Consequences are not threats made to control another person. They should only be actions you sincerely intend to take if a boundary is violated. A code red boundary violation does not require you to set a consequence. You get out of there immediately. The relationship is over. And so for me, I'd written in there, a code red boundary is if somebody treats me with disdain, contempt, hostility, or aggression. A person who treats another person like this does not like or love them, let alone respect them. So friends don't treat friends like that. And somebody who loves you doesn't treat you like that either. So it's a good idea to distance yourself from people that really show you that they don't like you at all. Um, Enforcing a boundary does not mean arguing about it or explaining it until you are blue in the face. Your boundaries are your boundaries and they are not up for debate. If somebody violates a boundary and you ignore it or fail to recognize it, you may feel angry, uncomfortable, resentful, misunderstood, frustrated, taken advantage of, victimized. Never ignore these feelings. Take the time to figure them out so you can do better in the future. Emotional manipulators push boundaries because they want what they want, often at the expense of others. What's important is to resist the temptation to rewrite boundaries on the fly. That's so true. And she brings up a good point too. She said it's really hard to enforce a boundary when you don't even know it's being violated. And that's so many people oftentimes get um, to the point of, they're like, I can't hang on anymore. This relationship is so crazy making and frustrating, and I can't handle it. Or the abusive person breaks up with them, which, and of course, at that time, the person's feeling absolutely emotionally devastated. And of course, for those of us that have been through it, we're like, oh my goodness, this is such a gift in disguise, because had they continued to hang on, the damage that would have continued to have happened would have been tremendous. But if we're not aware of our bound, because again, this stuff's not taught, so like nobody really knows when their boundaries are being violated, because it's not taught, and it's really not that intuitive of a thing. It becomes intuitive once you're aware of it. Once you're aware of it, I mean, you get it, you see it, you practice it, like you're kind of well on your way, but it's when you don't realize this stuff and trying to figure it out, you're lost in that fog. It's difficult. So, okay, let's see. And then I guess just to reiterate, it's important to practice self-love and confidence every day until it becomes natural. Setting and defending your boundaries is an excellent way to do that, and frankly, it is the only way. You matter, your boundaries matter, and you can do this. So that is kind of my top 10 takeaways on this book. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Again, the book is called Boundaries After a Pathological Relationship, and it's by Adelyn Birch. You can get the link down below. I think it's really affordable. I think it was like $4 or so on Kindle. So really good book, quick read, highly recommend it. And I know, right? Angela says, how in the heck did I not know these things before? This seems so obvious. And oh yeah, I was love bombed and on the rebound. Ugh. Yes, I know. But it's one of those, once we know different, we can do different. And um, once that light goes on, it goes on. But then that's the other part of like the crazy making thing is then it's that light's not on for so many people, and then you're aware of it and so many other people aren't. And then they'll tell you, oh, you're making a big deal out of nothing, and oh, come on, lighten up, or you're too sensitive, or all of these things. And it can really, that can really knock a person off balance. But odds are you're not too sensitive. You're not making a big deal out of things. You're just seeing things more clearly than a lot of other people are seeing them. Yep. Karen says, eyes wide open now. Yep. Yes. And Maria, a great point. And she says, it's not about carrying a book around, but really it's knowing about your deal makers and deal breakers. And it's what's got so many of us here. There is no shame in thinking very clearly and closely about what you want. Yes. And there's a saying out there that, most people spend more time planning their next vacation than they do thinking about what they want in their partner. I think especially if you have children that are getting close to dating, have this discussion with them. Talk to them about boundaries and deal breakers and standards and love bombing, and how it can be so easy to get caught up in thinking somebody, oh, that person's so attractive, I really want to be with them, and kind of the different elements that really need to be there, morals, values, attitude, um, trust, that sense of mutuality, of trust and support, um, taking things slow, all of this. I mean, because again, so much of the exact opposite of this stuff is taught, and then people wonder. We all wonder, like, how are we so off in the bushes here, and how did we get so far off track? And it's, you know, it's like this stuff's not taught. So it's important. These are important conversations to have. Yeah, Inner Fire says, I didn't give myself enough time after the first one. And so I so easily slipped into a relationship with two more horrible people I would have never in my right mind have gotten involved with. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And and too, and Maria, you were saying about getting in tune with like your deal makers and your deal breakers and stuff. And odds are we probably already have a handful of those. We just haven't really thought about them before. So, for some people, certain things are just an absolute no way. Like if a person maybe if they don't have a job, or if they don't have their own place, or if they don't, like animals, or if they, uh, I don't know, any number of things. So it's good to kind of examine that and think about, okay, yeah, I guess I already do have some deal makers and deal breakers, and what what am I flexible on and what am I not flexible on? So, okay. Well, with that said, I think we're going to call it a night. You guys, thank you so much for joining us. And then real quick too, if you're hopping on, my second book is out. I could not wait to release it. It was freaking me out having it just sit there on my computer. I was so afraid it was going to get like deleted or something was going to happen to it. So I just went ahead and published it. So it's called Out of the Fog, and it's by me, Dana Morningstar. It's up on Amazon. It's free until like tomorrow night. So please go grab an ebook copy of it before then if you are interested. And let me know what you think of it. I'll be curious. So you guys take care. I will see you next week. And as always, just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I'll see you next week. Okay. Bye.